Alright, let's get a few other things here set. I think I have everything ready. I have no idea. I'm completely out of it right now. But everything on the left or the right is turned off. Everything on the left is turned on. And I think we're good to go. So let's go ahead and get this started. Hello, Shadowcat back, and today, as I said in the description, I really couldn't figure out what I want to talk about this week, and it was a rough week. I kind of ran out of time to put together a really good lecture on something, because goodness knows there are things to talk about right now, and there are lectures that I really want to do. One of them that I want to do is on words and meanings, but that is a very in-depth lecture that requires a lot of very careful attention before I can pull that one off. That one is a little above me, but you know, gotta push boundaries somewhere. So given that that one is not ready yet, I figured we would just cover some of the stuff that's happening recently. And I wanted to kind of pick up where I left off in the last lecture, where we talked about making assumptions and assertions and things like that. Because we use these tools to kind of look to the future. And I've been doing this a long time. And when I say I've been doing this a long time, I mean I've been doing this ever since I was, you know, a teenager, and I was starting to learn critical thinking and things like that. The ability to look at a series of events and say, okay, these things are happening right now, and if all the dominoes continue to fall over the way they are, then where might we end up? And to me, I always thought it was, you know, a fun game. How far ahead can you predict the future and still be right? And for some people out there, they're going to look at that, they're going to listen to that, and they're going to say, well, that's just dumb. And to a certain degree, you might be right about that. At the same time, though, this is speculation, and there are entire businesses built around speculation. Stock market finances are built around speculation. Anything to do with sports is based on speculation. That's why we had an entire lecture just on how to use critical thinking to try and figure out a series of events. And personally, I thought we did really well on that one. Let me check a couple of things here just to make sure everything is good. Everything is still good. Okay. I'm a little worried about my connection stuff today because we got a whole bunch of snow last night and a whole bunch of wind, and my connection and power is not great to begin with. Like, we have a generator, but a generator is not really going to help when the entire area goes down. You don't have internet if the local node doesn't have power. So, just kind of keeping an eye on things. But anyway, when we were talking about making assumptions, and that was the wrong word. I said I was going to stop using the word assumption. I was going to start using a different word, and now I don't remember what the word was. I have to go back and listen to my own lectures. But anyway, when we talked about that, we did discuss a few examples. But one of the things that I find interesting is I have been saying for a long time, I don't know if I ever said it necessarily on stream, but if I haven't said it before, I will say it right now, so that it is etched in bits across the internet. The Western world is regressing into a medieval fiefdom. Okay? The Western world is regressing into a medieval fiefdom. Now, why do I say that? Well, that is an absolutely wild assertion. That was the word assertion. Assumption versus assertion. So that is a wild assertion to make. Why would I say such a thing? Well, again, we go back and say, what were the dominoes that led to living in a medieval fiefdom, okay? How do you go from living in a society like we live in now, where we enjoy a wide latitude of freedoms, to a lifestyle where you own nothing? In fact, you are owned by somebody, and everything you possess is owned by somebody. How do we get from point A to point Z? Now, there's a lot of steps in there that you got to go through before you can get there. That's not an A-B thing. And JP is in the chat. Hello, JP. JP says you got about 4 inches of snow. I haven't actually been outside. I don't know how much we got. I think we only got maybe 2 or 3. However, I saw somebody out clearing it with a leaf blower, and I don't own a leaf blower. I think I'm going to end up owning a leaf blower. Because, yeah, I like that. JP also says COVID did it. COVID did not do it. However, COVID is going to play a role in this. So, how do we get from step A to step Z? Well, I want to share something with you. This is something that I hear brought up a lot, and it's because this is a great piece of advice. It's a great piece of wisdom that you should live with. And even though it's not attributed, it just says it's a Greek proverb. It simply says, "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in." In other words, doing the right thing, building systems, laying foundations that you will never personally benefit from, simply for the reason that it will make things better for everybody else. This is generosity, this is humility, this is everything that we want to see in people. And if you have an entire society built around this kind of wisdom, you will have a growing society. It's one of the things that people point out, and I think I brought this up last time, was the Revenge of the Nerds question. Okay? Would you rather live in a society during its ascendance, or would you rather live in a society during its decline? Well, if you live in your society during its ascendance, this is what you get to live in. Oops, don't make it bigger. But this is what you get to live in. You do not have all the pleasantries. You do not have all the luxuries. You are going to lay the foundations. You are going to build the industries and the infrastructure that is going to create the luxuries that you will not benefit from, but that your children and your children's children will. This is very important. However, just like when I have said that every warning that we ever receive is also an instruction, so too does this go both ways. I've said it before, I've said it before, many people have said it before, I cannot claim credit for this one, but 1984 was not an instruction manual. Okay? Neither was Animal Farm, neither was Brave New World, neither were any of these cautionary tales. And yet, what do we see every day? We see these books, these stories, literally being played out in real time. These things always cut both ways, and it requires vigilance, dedication, and the will to act to prevent it. Because just like we, normal people, would love to see, as this proverb says, trees planted, even though we may never benefit from them, there are other people, other forces, other nations, other societies who are doing the same thing to us. Which brings us back to the original idea that I started with here. Which was, how do we go from being a free nation to a medieval fiefdom? Let's look at this. So, very interestingly, back in the 90s, there was, and I wish I could remember his name. I'm really bad with names, but you might know it in the chat. There was an ex-KGB agent who escaped the Soviet Union, made it to the US. And when he got to the US, of course, he was debriefed by literally every single three-letter agency we have. And he laid down some very interesting knowledge on us. Oh, and JP says, happy belated birthday. JP, you said happy birthday yesterday. You already got me, but thank you again. Yes, yesterday was my birthday. February 16th. So if you want to mark it on your calendars for next year, there you go. Anyway, though, in talking to the KGB agent, he shared with the intelligence agencies, he shared with journalists and reporters and basically anybody who would listen to him for long enough. He shared with him the idea that the KGB had when it came to destabilizing other nations. See, the US likes results. Okay, and we like results now. That's part of our national culture. We love instant gratification. We love it in our food, we love it in our entertainment, and we love it in our international policy. And if we don't like what a country is doing, we have a tendency to, I don't know, blow up their presidential villa with a Predator drone. It does kind of send a message. However, hold on, I'm thinking. No, it has not worked out for us yet. Like, literally never. It has never worked out for us. In every single instance where we have gone in to destabilize another country, or to assassinate another president, or replace a regime, it's never worked for us. What was that show? Oh, I don't remember it. I don't remember it now. It was a cartoon that I really enjoyed watching it, and now I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Oh no, Alzheimer's is coming early. But anyway, it's an old guy talking to his son, grandson, something like that. And he laments that his father is a terrorist. Oh no, wait, I remember what it was. It wasn't a TV show. It was actually Hellsing Ultimate Abridged, which if you've never seen it, absolutely worth your time. Absolutely worth your time. Everything that Team 4-Star does is golden. But it's one of the characters speaking with his grandfather, and his grandfather is, lamenting the fact that the child is lamenting that the children found out that his grandfather is a terrorist, a murderer. And they're bullying him for it, and his grandpa's like, what? How are you not the coolest kid in school? It's like, did you really do those things? It's like, well, yes, I did. I mean, we were paid to overthrow a despotic totalitarian African government. It was replaced in a week, but I still got paid. And, it's the replaced in a week part that really made the joke. Because it doesn't really matter what the US has done around the world, whether we've done it directly or we've done it through third parties, it has literally never worked. Why? Because we have a really bad habit of not really thinking more than one or two steps ahead. I mean, we are literally the underpants gnomes from South Park. Find a country that doesn't agree with us, leave the entire presidential villa in a crater, question mark, question mark, question mark, profit. That is pretty much our entire international policy. The only reason that it's worked so far is because, well, nobody else wants to be in a crater. So that has worked out for us so far. The Soviet Union, however, they didn't really have that capability. Okay? The Soviet Union was scary, but as for how dangerous they were, it begged the question. Did they have lots of nukes? Yes. Did any of them work? Up for debate. They definitely had the ability to make nuclear weapons. But did they actually have the capability of making the supposed tens of thousands and reaching all the way around the world? I don't know. Could they do it once? Yes. Could they do it a handful of times? Absolutely. Did they have the capability of, like, massive nuclear strikes around the world? Highly doubtful. But it didn't really matter because just the threat that you could be one of those targets is honestly enough. Nobody wants to be nuked by one nuke. And this, of course, was the Cold War. And so the US is doing their best to destabilize Russia. Russia is doing the USSR is doing their best to destabilize us. However, one thing that we can say for the USSR is, while they're absolutely garbage at running a country, they are absolutely brilliant when it comes to espionage. They are really, really super good at it. And so the KGB and all the other various intelligence agencies inside the USSR looked for any possible way that they could take down the US. Sure, if they could have taken down the US in like one fell swoop, they would have done it. That was out of the question. So instead, they played the long game. They said, infiltrate, indoctrinate, go for the culture, target the children, go for their media, get into their movies, their radio shows, their television shows, get into the schools, get into the books, get into literally everything. Attack them from every single angle you possibly can. And if everything works out right, we'll be able to take down the entire country. We'll be able to watch them implode by knocking out every single support pillar around the foundation, while leaving the single support column in the middle still standing. The end result is that single support column may stand, but without the rest of them, the building, or in this case, the nation, will collapse. Whether it take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whether it takes 1, 4, or 6 generations, if we can remove the foundation, then we will take down the nation. And we had somebody from the KGB who literally confirmed, no, that's totally what we do. Okay, we've been working on this for a long time. And I wish I had it that I could pull it up right now, but I don't have it. I could probably find it though really quick. So why don't we do that? Let me just do a quick little Google search. Interview. There we go. Haha, I found it. That didn't take long. Let's see. JP, you said Oleg Gordevsky? Nope. Vitaly Sergeyevich? No. Apparently it was Yuri Bezmenov. Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. I love Russian names. Russian names are awesome. But anyway, this was the guy that talked about all of it. And I wonder if he's got the stages in here. Let me just do a quick little skim. And I don't want to actually watch any videos, although there are plenty of videos on the subject. Let's see. Demoralization, that was the first one. Right, so demoralization, then it becomes destabilization. The third stage would be crisis. And that's the end of the article. But anyway, this is what he said about it. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. To quote directly, it says, what it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, no one is able to come to any sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their families, their community, or their country. Bezmenov described the process as a great brainwashing that has 4 basic stages. The first stage is called demoralization, which takes from 15 to 20 years to achieve. According to the former KGB agent, that is the minimum number of years it takes to re-educate one generation of students that is normally exposed to the ideology of its country. In other words, the time it takes to change what people are thinking. He used examples of the 1960s hippies coming to the positions of power in the 1980s in the government and businesses of America. Bezmenov claimed this generation was already contaminated by Marxist-Leninist values. Of course, this claim that many baby boomers are somehow espousing KGB-tainted ideas is hard to believe, but Bezmenov's larger point addressed why people who have been gradually demoralized are unable to understand that this is happening to them. Referring to such people, Bezmenov said, they are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in certain patterns. He alluded to Pavlov there. You cannot change their mind even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception of the logic and behavior. Now, I want to stop here for a second. Because while he said up here that this would take a minimum of 15 to 20 years, it's just that, a minimum. Okay? If you want to, say, start a business, you start with, certain values. You want to make sure that you maintain a clean and orderly store or workshop or whatever it is you're doing. You want to maintain good quality. You want to maintain good customer relations. Okay, you want to do all these things to attract new customers and to produce quality, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a good or service. But you never stop doing that. Okay, if you want your business to be successful, you never want to stop doing these things. You don't want to stop keeping your store or workshop orderly and clean, because that will not benefit you. You don't want to stop providing quality. That will not benefit you. You do not want to stop with your customer service. This will not benefit you. You always maintain your foundations. In this case, the foundation is demoralization. And so while it takes 15 to 20 years to target one generation, by the time that generation is growing up, you simply start on the next one, which is much easier. So we're talking right here about the hippie movement, which was, as he said, contaminated by Marxist-Leninist values, but this is also going to expand into other things. It's not just going to be the class struggles that Marx and Lenin espoused. It's going to be everything from racial relations to identity politics. It's going to be the LGBTQ umbrella. It's going to be feminism. It's going to be every single divisive topic that you can think of right now. And notice how every single one of them did seem to come with its own generation. There's a reason for that. They were introduced generationally. So, we get down to the end of this where it says, you cannot change their mind even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and logic of behavior. Think about where we are at today. Think about the arguments on literally anything, whether it be social, whether it be cultural, whether it be political. Think about all the people who have firmly held beliefs and absolutely will not change. Ever. Does not matter what you show them, doesn't matter what you tell them, they will not change. This has been going on not for 15 years, not for 20 years. This has been going on for more than half a century. Again, play in the long term. This continues. Demoralization is a process that is irreversible. Bezmenov actually thought, back in 1984 when the first interview took place, that the process of demoralizing America was already completed, that it would take another generation and another couple of decades to get people to think differently and return to their patriotic American values, claimed the agent. In what is perhaps the most striking passage from the interview, here's how he described the state of a demoralized person. Quote, "As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore," said Bezmenov. "A person who was demoralized is unable to act or to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he receives a kick in his fan bottom. When a military boot crushes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that." That's the tragedy of the situation of demoralization. And this is something I have talked about at great length, because I have described this as the modern day religion. I have spoken at length about how modern leftism is a religion. Some people want to call it a cult. I find that it is far more expansive than just a cult. Cults do not have institutions of power. Cults do not usually have rituals that they practice on the regular. They generally have a loose hierarchy, usually it says one person in charge. Religions have multiple tiers of hierarchies, which we see in modern leftism. And, of course, the key to any faith is that faith is untouchable. There is no amount of facts or information or evidence that can ever destabilize faith. The only thing that can destabilize faith is simply losing faith. I look at how many Christians out there still believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old. There's not a ton of them. But your most hardcore Catholics who believe wholeheartedly in the creation story will adhere to the idea that the earth is only 6,000 years old. And if you present them with dinosaur bones, with fossil records, with geostrata, with carbon dating, with astrological records, if you provide them with all of this stuff, all of them they will all say the same thing, that the evidence has been fabricated by God to create the world on which we stand. It is literally the argument that God put them there. You cannot give these people any amount of evidence that will get them to believe that the world was not created by God in 6 days, 6,000 years ago. Give or take a day or two. So too, if you go to many people in the socio-cultural political sphere and give them information, are they going to change their minds? And we can see this very plainly with Donald Trump. Not going to get into Donald Trump extensively, but just look at the opinions surrounding him, the vitriol directed at him, and what could you possibly tell those people that would make them believe that Donald Trump is anything less than the Antichrist walking the earth? We have actually gotten to the point where they've stopped calling him Hitler, because they have determined that Donald Trump is actually worse than Hitler. They would actually rather praise Hitler than praise Donald Trump. What could you possibly give them that's going to convince them otherwise? So getting back to this, it's not hard to see at the state of many modern Americans. We have become a society of polarized tribes, with some people flat out rejecting facts in favor of narratives and opinions, as I just explained. Once demoralization is completed, the second stage of ideological brainwashing is destabilization. During this 2 to 5 year period, asserted Bezmenov, what matters is the targeting of essential structural elements of the nation: the economy, foreign relations, and defense systems. Basically, the subverter, in this case Russia, would look to destabilize every one of those areas in the United States, considerably weakening it. Again, we've seen this. The targeting of the economy. Oh yeah, our economy is in shambles for a variety of reasons. Whether those reasons be our economic policy with other countries, whether it be the actual kneecapping of our own economy just through our own regulations, such as refusing to use all the sources of energy we have available. Because let's be honest here, is oil the best source of energy that we have? In the long term, maybe not. But we don't need to turn off all of the oil while we develop new energy. We shouldn't be green only. We should be green in addition. We should be using all forms of energy available to us and developing new ones. When we look at things like our foreign relations are terrible. Particularly right now, the world hates us. And when we look to our defense systems, the United States defense abilities are at the lowest they have ever been. I dare say that the original 13 colonies had greater defensive muster than the current United States defense. Do we have bigger missiles and bigger ships? Yes. Do we have the better capability of utilizing them? It's debatable. The third stage would be crisis. It would take up to 6 weeks to send a country into crisis. Explained Bezmenov, the crisis would bring a violent change of power, structure, and economy. It will be followed by the last stage, normalization. That's when your country is basically taken over, living under a new ideology and reality. So, as I pointed out, the whole demoralization part is not a single step, it is a rolling wheel, and it rolls over every single generation in turn. And so, just as every generation is demoralized in a different way, the destabilization, crisis, and normalization also comes in turn. When we looked at the hippie movement, of course, they grew up and they took over points of business, points of political power, all of that stuff. And they went through and severely weakened our military capabilities because they hated things like the Vietnam War, which, while justified to a certain degree, did not justify what they did to the country afterwards. When we looked at things like the Civil Rights Act and what was done after that, especially in terms of like feminism, we see how that has affected the entire nation, economically, militarily, politically. And we've seen what the whole LGBTQ thing has done, especially once they started adding on the rest of the alphabet to that, and worming it into literally every single facet of the culture, trying to destroy the culture from the ground up. Now, the thing that I want to really talk about here, now that we've got this laid as a foundation, is the fact that when we come back here, and we say, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in. If I remember my history correctly, and history is not my strong suit, the Berlin Wall fell in 1991, shortly after the fall of the USSR, which I think was in 89. And that was basically the end of the entire Soviet experiment. It did not do well. That being said, though, the machinations that they set in motion did not die with them. Every seed that they had planted continued to operate even without the USSR. And just because the USSR was gone did not mean that Russia was. Russia was still there, they had simply lost many of their territories. They still had the KGB, they still had the rest of their intelligence agencies, they still continued to work behind the scenes. Many of the people who were high up in the USSR never lived long enough to see the outcome of the policies that they had started, the programs they started. But that didn't mean that they weren't there and they weren't doing their job. They literally planted trees whose shade they knew they would never sit in. They may have hoped that they would, but they never did. And in fact, I think most of them knew that when you're a higher up person in the USSR, usually your lifespan is pretty short anyway. Communists do not like to they're not really a real merciful bunch. Anyway, though, we talk about the long-term effects of these things, and we get back to the entire purpose. How do we go from being a free country to some kind of medieval fiefdom? Well, we already brought up the fact that the USSR was doing their best to destabilize the US, okay? They'd already put these plans into motion. They were already working on demoralization and destabilization, okay? Everything is coming up aces for them. Until this guy, Yuri Bezmenov, comes out and basically blows the lid off of everything, okay? Now, we all know what's going on. Now, we're essentially brought to two choices. Well, three choices, really. Number one, how do we stop it? Okay? How do we stop what is happening dead? How do we freeze it in its tracks and begin to reverse it? Okay? That's option number one. Option number two, because this is always an option, we could do nothing. We can do absolutely nothing and see if it works itself out. It is called the lazy option, and I am a big fan of the lazy option given how much I employed in my own life. The lazy option almost never works. So that leaves us with a last option. Okay? If we're not going to stop it and reverse it, and we're not going to do nothing, then the last option is, how do we profit from it? Because obviously, if you are somebody who wants power, and you've been constrained by things like laws and regulations and things like that your entire life, well, here's your chance. The USSR was already doing the best they could to dissolve things like that. So now all you have to do is benefit from it. Okay. So instead of, stopping this, why don't we go ahead and encourage it? Why don't we have more activism? Why don't we have more civil rights and civil causes? Why don't we expand it? Why don't we fund it? Why don't we give it press attention? Why don't we do everything? And so we'll go ahead and we'll make a great big movement out of gay rights, all the way through the 80s and 90s. We will continue to promote feminism, and we'll say that, every woman should be doing everything, and she does not need men anymore. Men are in fact useless. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, to quote the book. And we'll continue to expand it. Not only is it going to be gay rights, but now it's going to be all the rights for all the people who have different persuasions. And we'll even add a few. We'll add a whole bunch of them. Why? To further it from the inside, because people can profit from it. But that doesn't turn us into a medieval fiefdom, now does it? No, it does not. So again, we may be on step B or C, maybe even D at this point. But Z is still a long way off. So how do we get there? Well, we're already working on destabilizing the culture, but there's still these things that keep holding everything together. Things like families. If we wanted to break the nation, we have to break it up from a single culture into multiple cultures. If we want to break up the culture, we have to break up the country from one culture into many cultures. If we want to do that, we're going to have to break up regions into smaller regions. And then we'll have to break up those regions into communities, and then we'll have to break up those communities as well, because nobody can have common cause and partnership with anybody else. So we have to continuously break down the country into its smallest components, and then break down those components. And fortunately, we already have all the tools that we need. Feminism. If we're going to break down anything, we need to break up the family. If we can break up the family unit, the strongest unit in the country, everything else should fall down with it. If you don't even care about your own family, then you don't care about your neighbors. If you don't care about your neighbors, you don't care about the rest of the community, who's not even your neighbors. If you don't care about the rest of your community, you won't care about your city, your state, or even your country. And in fact, if we can get you to resent your family, or just resent men in general, or women in general, although usually it's more directed at men, then you may come to resent everything else after that as well, and actively seek to tear it down. And what have we seen over the last 20, 30 years? It has been an active quest to demonize and disregard everything in Western culture. And that's not just the US. That's the US, that's Canada, that's England, that's France, that's Germany, that's Spain. All of Western culture has been targeted in the same way. So we can see how we're removing the foundational pillars. We are further demoralizing everyone. But this is not making you a whole lot of progress towards that medieval fiefdom we talked about. You're removing a lot of the barriers in your way, but you're not making a lot of progress. So how do we make progress? Well, if we're going to get a medieval fiefdom, what are the things that we need? We need to have unimaginable wealth. Okay? We need to have unimaginable wealth. We need to have unimaginable assets in terms of things like land. We need to have vast swaths of land. We need to have industry. We need to have agriculture. And we need to have people who will work the land, the agriculture, the industry, all of that for us. People who have no rights, they have no voice, they have no independence, no freedom. If we're going to be the new medieval lords of the modern era, we need to have land, assets, and serfs. And right now, all the people are still independent. We don't have families anymore. We don't have communities. We barely have cities and states. We don't really have a country anymore. But we don't actually own this stuff. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to use a lot of those people who have we've already demoralized, and we're going to use them to destabilize the country. We are going to use them to change things like laws and policies using the rhetoric that we've already used. We're going to associate the country with something like, I don't know, the patriarchy, okay? The country is now patriarchal. Remember how men were bad? Well, guess what? The country was made by men. And that makes the country bad. And so we have to change the country. We have to take it away from the bad men. We have to give it away to the good men, okay? And the bad men are all those ones who are in governments, you know, the ones with the powdered wigs and the gabbles and the robes and everything else. Yeah, screw those men. You know who the good men are? They're the ones who were funding your activist marches, okay? They were the ones who were building offices for you to plan out your next event, okay? They're all the corporations. Okay? The corporations, the companies, the businesses, all of those things that were helping you. And those corporations should be given more power. Okay, but there's laws that really kind of prevent that. So we can't just, give the corporations power. No. We're going to have to change laws and stuff. But see, that's where we give it another 15 to 20 years. Because now, after a certain period of time where you have been pushing all the activism and feminism and everything, now you have these people who are getting into places like Congress. They're getting into the legislatures. They're getting offices of power and influence. And now, with a lot of money from the corporations themselves, and some help from the lobbyists in the capitals of various states and countries, we're able to change laws, change policies. Now, the corporations have much more freedom with which to go through and do basically whatever they want. So fantastic. Now, if you're looking to become a medieval lord, well, there you go. And so now that you have the freedom to do this, you just have to start doing it. However, there's still an awful lot of people in your country, and those people have families still, and they have houses, and they have bills, and there's an economy and everything else. How are you going to deal with this? Because you can't start acquiring land if there's still people on the land. Well, the first thing you're going to need is less people, okay? Because if there's less people, then they won't need nearly as much land. And so we need to get the birth rates down, okay? We can't just go and remove people. We've seen what happens when you try and do that, okay? Germany tried it. The rest of the world had a bit of a disagreement with it. Granted, that's not why we went into World War II, But once we were there, you know, we took exception to a lot of what they were doing. So we can't do that. What we can do, though, is simply stop them from breeding. And if we can stop them from breeding, well, then there'll be less people over time. And oh my goodness, look at this. We're already started. By the time you came to the realization that, you know, you need to have less people if you want to do things like, I don't know, acquire a whole bunch of land and stuff, well, we were already well on that track with things like the birth control pill and abortion and dissolving the family in the first place, which meant that a lot of people were not having kids at all. By engineering all of these different things to control population in the first place, well, now the population is going down, which is something that we can see right now. Anybody who's been paying attention to the birth rates in the Western world over the last 20 to 30 years will see that we have been on the steady decline. And in fact, most Western nations at this point are below replacement value. And there are some countries in the world, I'm talking countries like South Korea and Japan, who are actually at such low replacement levels that they may actually be a dying people at this point. There may not be enough left for them to reverse it. Particularly in South Korea, but Japan is not that far off. So we're already on the pathway of getting rid of a lot of people. All we have to do is just kind of lean on that a little bit more, and we can push it even further. Here's the problem, though. Now that we're reducing populations, we are able to snatch up just great swaths of people, or of land. We can get land everywhere. We can get houses everywhere. We can buy buildings. We can do everything. Our portfolio is becoming massive, okay? We're doing a great job here. Problem here is, though, eventually, once we have acquired everything, we will need people again to actually work the land. But we have a bit of a problem here. And that is, when we get to that point, we're going to need people who we can work without any kind of hassle, without things like regulations and rules and laws and things like that getting in the way. And yes, it is true that we already own all the court systems, we own the people who make the laws. Even though we know this, and we do own all of this, there is no way that we can simply go through and say, you know what, all of those OSHA requirements, yeah, we're dissolving all the OSHA requirements. And all the labor regulations, we're dissolving all the labor regulations, okay? No more minimum wage, no more maximum work hours, no restrictions on working ages, none of it, okay? We can go back to the days when we could work anyone and everyone as long and as hard as we want. Okay? That's what we want to get to, of course. But if we did this just like all at once, well, people would revolt. Okay? We don't want a revolution. No revolution. Revolutions are bad. So how do we do this? Well, we were already decreasing the population. Okay? So we're no longer on step A, B, C, or D, okay? We're on step like N, O, P, somewhere in that area. Okay, we're making good progress now. We need people. However, we need people who are not going to complain, people who aren't going to whine, people who aren't going to be lazy. We need people. We need lots of people. We need people that are going to work. We need people who are going to work and people who have no way of doing anything about it. Okay? This would be really easy to fix if we still had slavery. That was a mistake, wasn't it? We could just start importing people from around the world. We could put them on ships. We could ship them across, the ocean. from Africa, from the Middle East. We could put them in chains. If we had slavery, all of our problems would be fixed. But unfortunately, we have a massive population of freed slaves here already, and if we try to put them back in chains, or we try to bring people over in chains, again, we're probably going to end up with revolution. We don't want revolution. So how do we do it? What if we didn't get slaves? What if we didn't take slaves? But what if we just let them come and say anybody who wants to work can? What if we were to just throw the doors open, recall all the guards, and just say anybody who walks in can work? These people will have no citizenship, and because of that, they will have no rights, they will have no privileges, they will have no voice, and eventually they will have no choice. We can simply bring them in, and we can use them for whatever we want. This is, of course, a solution to all of our problems. And so that's what they did. They opened all the doors, they recalled all the guards, and they said, look, just let them come in. So for as far as our native population is going down, which, I mean, for all of our purposes, this is a good thing, we'll now bring in an entirely new labor force that we can use, abuse, and discard as we please. And it doesn't really matter. If one of them dies, there's 10 more coming across the border today to replace it. We can use them up like nails. And if one nail gets bent, you just cast it aside and grab another one from the box. However, we have a problem here. And that problem is the native population. It is declining, yes, and it's on its way to going away. However, now they're complaining that they have nowhere to live. Okay, that is a bit of a problem. They have nowhere to live, they have nowhere to work, they have nowhere to sustain themselves, and this is turning into a bit of a crisis. Well, first off, every crisis is an opportunity, so we're going to use this as best we can. But at the end of the day, all we really need to do is just keep them happy long enough until they go away. And once they're gone, all of our problems are gone with them. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to not let them buy anything, but we're going to rent to them. We'll rent them any house we think they can afford, okay? So anywhere that they want to live, there'll be an option for it. If we have to build new houses that are, of course, owned by the corporation, we'll build some new houses. They're all going to be very small. They'll all be kind of cookie cutter. But you know what? 4 walls, a roof, a bathroom. That's all you really need, right? So we'll rent them everything they need. When it comes to jobs, we can subsidize them for a while. We can give them basic nutrition and things like that. And all we're really doing is just waiting for them to grow old and die off. And there are other things we can do that'll make that a little bit faster. We can add in things like assisted suicide. So, you know, when they've had enough of it and they're ready to go, we can make that easy. We have a lot of them that right now are trying to sterilize themselves. There's really no purpose in stopping that. So we'll just let them do as they want to do. We'll give them their space to just kind of go off on their own and disappear, and the problem will fix itself. Seems easy enough. All we have to do is put in like the bare minimum effort. So now, on our little quest from getting from A to Z, we're somewhere in like maybe the QRS area. Okay? And by the way, that's where we are right now. We're in the QRS kind of area. where do we go from here then? Okay, because everything else we can't argue about. It's already happened. You can call this speculation. However, I do believe that the actions taken by people speak for themselves. The actions they've taken, the press conferences they've given, the statements they've released, but again, more importantly, the actions they've taken speak for themselves. These are not just wild assumptions. These are measured assertions. So now where do we go? Well, we do have companies like BlackRock, like Vanguard, all these places that are literally building up wide swaths of property in places like Texas, in Oklahoma, Kansas, anywhere that's got lots of open land, and they're building them up into these massive subdivisions. And they've already stated these subdivisions will not be ownable by anyone else. These are all going to be explicitly and exclusively rental properties. We've also had groups like the World Economic Forum come out and say you will own nothing, but you'll be happy. Well, they're doing really good at one part of that at least. The idea that you are going to be a renter for the rest of your life, you will own nothing. And you're going to have to be happy with it, even if you're not really that happy at all. Because it's either you can rent or you can be homeless. Which would you rather be? At the same time, the economy is still falling apart, even more so now that we have these massive quantities of migrants coming through who want to work, they want jobs, they have families to feed too, they want places to live as well, which means that we're going to need more housing, which means that these big corporations will be buying up more housing to rent out, buying up more land to develop. Where does this lead us to? Let's look forward 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. If we follow the graphs that follow birth rate, and I wonder if I can find it actually. Let me just do a quick little search here. Okay, let me do a quick little search. U.S. birth rate. There we go. That was easy. So here's our birth in the U.S. Canada is even lower. And North Korea is higher? Huh. Didn't see that coming. Oh, North Korea and the U.S. are about the same. Or no, wait, they're not. I didn't actually click on it. North Korea is about 1.82. United States is 1.64. Canada is about 1.4. So birth rates are going down. They are still going down. They will probably continue to go down if we could move this graph even further. So we're going to have a continuously shrinking population of native citizens with rights and privileges and everything else. Of course, if you're going to be losing your native population, you will have to replace it so you have people who can still work. That means you'll have to import more. You will import more people who do not have rights, do not have privileges, do not have anything to their name, except for the fact that they're there. These are people who are not protected by any kind of workers' rights, any kind of labor disputes, because they know that if anything were to happen to them on the job, say OSHA requirements were ignored and they got hurt, what are they going to do? Go to the police? Go to a lawyer? Go to anybody who is going to look at them and say, yes, you were hurt on the job. However, you are not a citizen, and rather than take you to court and, try this case for you, we're going to send you and deport you, and we'll just replace you with somebody else. So when we look forward, we know that we're going to need workers. We can bring in these other workers who can do nothing about it. And so as we keep looking forward, the native population shrinks, the larger the migrant population grows, and somewhere in here, we hit a tipping point. Somewhere in here, we hit a point where there is literally nothing the native population can do by influence, by force, or otherwise, against the state itself. Now, as I pointed out, when it comes to the federal government using force on the actual U.S. citizenry, now, I can't speak for other nations, I can only speak for the U.S. The United States Army is only about 1 million soldiers strong, and that is all of them. That's soldiers on the ground, that's pilots in the air, that's naval officers on the seas, that's all of them. With a country that is roughly 300 and, well, somewhere between 350 million and 375 million, I can't find a solid number. Oh wait, hold on, no, there's a number right there. This says only 329 million? Wow, I thought we were higher than that. So in a population of 329.5 million, a military of only 1 million soldiers? Not very effective. But once the military is comparable to the native population, well, now you got other options. Now you no longer need to listen to them. You can simply turn the military on your own citizens, and you can strip them of their citizenship. You can strip them of their property. You can do pretty much anything you want to them. In fact, you could even go so far as to say, you just own them now, and now they will work for you. You will simply take their land because you can order the soldiers to remove them from it. Whatever they're doing, you can take whatever they make because you can order the soldiers to do it. You've been doing this to the migrant population for years. Now you can do it to the citizens. Well, they're not really citizens anymore. Now they're just serfs. And so we can see that once the population has dropped to a certain number and the migrant population is up to a certain number, you can finally just say, you know what? We're no longer going to be the country that we were. We're reforming it. We're no longer going to be a constitutional republic. We will now be a collection of kingdoms. And every single one of these corporations will get its own unique little region of land where they can own all the land, they own all the people, they own everything about it. And they can have their own coalition that keeps the United States as being the United States, but it won't be states anymore. It will just be whatever they control. Now, if I were to look at that and say that the United States that we know now is going to become a medieval fiefdom, that is an absolutely wild assertion to make. How could it possibly do that? Well, one step at a time. And they'll do it by demoralizing the population, by destabilizing every facet of the country, by knocking out every single pillar that holds the country up, until eventually it is so weakened that they can simply reshape it in their own image and take it over. Now, why did I want to talk about this today? Why did I even bring this up? Okay? The reason is because, as I said, we are right now in that QRS kind of area, okay? Things are bad. And how do I know this? I spend my life on the internet. I spend a lot of my time on YouTube. And I follow a lot of different channels. And I hear about it. One of the things that is becoming a really big part of mainstream news right now is the problems with relationships between men and women. Now, this is nothing new. People have been talking about this for a long time. And when I talk about people who have been talking about it for a long time, I mean people like the Honey Badgers. They are a men's rights group who have been talking about problems in the men's sphere and problems in relationships for well over a decade. Somebody new that I found recently is a woman named Melanie King, who's been very interesting to watch. I'm not sure how I feel about her. She does give me grifting vibes. That being said, however, watching her change over the course of less than a year has been fascinating. Going from somebody who had just kind of a morbid interest in the collapse of Western civilization to somebody who actually has abject anger and horror at what's going on. It's been fascinating to watch. And another channel that I found is called Cash Jordan. This is one of his videos that kind of inspired me to talk about this, but Cash Jordan is a New Yorker who explicitly talks about New York. And I don't live in New York. I don't even want to go to New York, but it's been fascinating to see how New York has been operating. And one of the things that they're struggling with in New York, especially right now, in the midst of the migrant crisis, with them being a sanctuary city, is the idea that right now there is a massive housing crisis in New York. And half of the problem of housing in New York is being exacerbated by the fact that every time somebody gets evicted from their apartment or they lose their house or something, Wall Street, these large investment firms, have been buying up all the houses that they can rent back to anybody who can manage to afford it after they've jacked up the rent on it. And so when it comes to things like apartments, they'll buy the apartments or condos or whatever it is, usually like one at a time. Or if they can just buy all of them, they'll just buy the entire building out from the person who owned the building before. And the end result is that New York can actually be drawn up now as just a map of all the largest investment firms and how much of the city is owned by said investment firms. Whether that's New York City proper or the outlying boroughs, Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, etc. So other people are starting to catch on to what's going on. To quote the Lotus Eaters from yesterday, the normies are noticing. It's too late, mind you, for most of it, but the fact that they're noticing means that there is still time to turn it around. And of course, this is why I say you should really look ahead. It's because you can turn things around if you realize what's going on. Now, how easy is it going to be to turn it around? Probably not very. Because we're up against some very, very powerful interests. How can you possibly change a law when you're up against people who have, for all intents and purposes, infinite money and resources? When their influence essentially extends to having actual puppets in the position of power? I don't know. But so long as everything is not in place already, there is still hope. And sometimes hope is all we need. After all, the American Revolution was founded on hope. Hope and desperation, but hope nonetheless, that we could be an independent nation. And it played out for us. Now that was a bit of an anomaly as far as the world is concerned, but as they say, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. It could happen again. And given enough time, it will. So that's where we stand right now. And this is one of the reasons why I had to do that lecture last time on assumptions versus assertions. Because we have plausible explanations and we have evidence for this entire sequence of events. And as more and more people wake up to what's going on and the potential long-term ramifications of what is happening around them, the better chance we have of this not happening at all. Now, on that note, and I don't have anything pulled up for this one, so I'm just going to make this go away. Actually, no, I'm not going to make this go away. I'm going to put the tree back up there because that's a nice tree. I like that tree. It's a good tree. I want to segue into the actual recent news with Donald Trump. I brought him up before earlier, and I said I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about him, and I really don't want to because there are things going on, and the only reason Trump is relevant is because he's the one being targeted. But he's not the one I want to talk about. Specifically, though, I want to talk about all of his lawsuits. 2 in particular. The first one that we can talk about will be his property case in New York. Now, the property case in New York is very interesting. And it's very interesting because when we talk about how things are changing and how we look to things long term, I was talking with somebody else yesterday who was talking about how bullshit the case is and how this is a gross miscarriage of justice and how there's no precedent for this ever being done. And the one thing that I had to tell them is, at the point we're at now, precedent is no longer needed. Precedent essentially has no more place in our modern legal lexicon. Because we're at the point where precedent doesn't matter. If there is no precedent for something being done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do it anyway. As a matter of fact, if there is precedent for something not being done explicitly for whatever reason, we're going to do it anyway. And if there is precedent for something being done, then we're probably just going to ignore that precedent. The fact is that everything that has been done before no longer matters. It doesn't. It no longer matters because nobody cares anymore. Okay? The rules no longer matter. The laws no longer matter. It's interesting because when we started talking about this, and I mentioned that in the interview with Yuri Bezmenov, he stated that you cannot tell people that white is white and black is black because you could give them all the information in the world and they would disregard it. Because they know what they know, they're going to act on what they know, they're going to do what they know. They don't care about what you say, they don't care about the consequences afterwards. They're going to do as they have essentially been programmed to do. And as I have stated, what we see in modern leftism is essentially a religion, where it's not just enough that you have these people who operate entirely on faith, entirely on ideology, and they are entirely immune from being swung in any other direction, but they actually have a mandate. They have a mandate from their ideology, a mandate from those above them, that they must carry out to the fullest extent every last, or the full reach of their ideology. They have to spread it, they have to inflict it, they have to proselytize it, everything. They must do everything they can. And so we look to the legal system. In the property case with Donald Trump, we have seen a tool used that, up until a couple of years ago, has not really been applied that often. That being a summary verdict. Now, when we say summary, that is to say that the case has been brought, and by the inspection of the judge, by their understanding of the case and everything, the evidence is so incredibly overwhelming that it does not need argument. that it does not need to have any kind of evidence presented, any arguments made. The case is literally open and shut. And so, a summary verdict can be entered. Okay? You are either guilty or not guilty, and there is no defense, which is what we've seen. We saw it with the Alex Jones trials, the multiple trials that he went through, and we have seen it in the multiple trials that Donald Trump has been through. He has been issued many summary verdicts. Which is why every time Donald Trump has gone to court recently, it has not been to argue his case. He has been explicitly told he is not allowed to argue his case. That part of the trial is already done. We're not here to argue the merits and the evidence. The verdict has already been laid down. We are merely here to ascertain how much you are to be punished. Now, anybody with even a cursory understanding of the United States Constitution would recognize that this is an absolute gross infringement of multiple rights in the Bill of Rights, but primarily and most explicitly the Fifth Amendment. However, the Fourth Amendment and Sixth Amendment are also in there. But it doesn't matter. They're going to do it anyway. Because they can do it, and they don't care. And so, we saw in the case of the property, to give that case a very, very short overview, the court in New York determined that Donald Trump had been defrauding multiple banks by overvaluing the value of his properties and then taking out loans on them. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the banks had come forward and said, no, actually we, every time we give a loan, have to have somebody go out to survey the land or the property and everything on it to establish that it is in fact worth what is being claimed. And we determined that the properties are worth what they were said. Not only that, but Trump took the loans and then paid the loans back with the appropriate interest on them. Meaning that no fraud has been committed, and no crime has been committed, civil or otherwise. So it really begs the question of why are we here? The court, of course, said it doesn't matter. We have done our own assessment and determined that, in this case, the value of the property of Mar-a-Lago is not even worth a quarter of what its neighboring properties are worth. Despite the fact that Mar-a-Lago sits on some of the most valuable real estate in the entire country, maybe even the entire world. And so the court in New York fined Donald Trump for more than $350 million. And many people have been speculating as to why. Why would you do that? Okay? What is the purpose of fining him $350 million? Do you think that Donald Trump has $350 million in cash just laying around? Probably not. However, this is court. And when you are fined and you can't pay the fine, well, what do? Number one, if you can't pay the fine in cash, then you pay the fine in assets. And since they have determined that Mar-a-Lago is only worth, I think they said like $8 million, $20 million, something like that, and that he owes $350 plus million, well, I guess they're just going to have to seize his his home in Mar-a-Lago. The buildings, the property itself, everything. But that's only going to cover a small fraction of it. So we'll also have to seize all of his properties in New York. So Trump Tower now belongs to the state of New York. And all of his other properties, I don't know what else he owns. Basically, the state of New York will now relieve Donald Trump of all properties that he owns. They will also relieve him of all businesses he owns, including things like Truth Social. And on top of that, they're also barring him, but not just him. Donald Trump has been barred from operating any business in the state of New York for 3 years. They have also barred his family, his wife, his sons, from operating any business in New York for 2 years. Which is a very interesting verdict to give. Because again, much as we saw down in Georgia, and we will get to Georgia in just a minute, we are seeing people being sentenced based on guilt by association. See, Donald Trump's family has committed no crime. And as a matter of fact, Donald Trump's family were not even defendants in the case. They were not named in any of the court documents until the sentence. They were not represented. They had no presence at all, and they had no voice. But they will be fined and punished all the same. Guilt by association. This is something that is blatantly illegal by constitutional law in the US. But they're doing it anyway, because they can. Because who's going to stop them? There's a very interesting thing that's being talked about right now by a large number of people. If you go on to Truth Social, if you go on to Twitter, if you go on to any one of these platforms that uses the little hashtag kind of system, and you look up Civil War is trending literally everywhere. And why is that? It's because people are looking forward, okay? Just like we talked about before, using evidence to make assertions. By thinking more than one step ahead, more and more people are looking at the state of the country and saying, I don't know how else this can end. Because if we can do this, and we can do the thing that comes afterwards, and after that, and after that, and after that, this leads to war. This is going to lead to bodies in the streets. It is going to lead to neighbors murdering each other. When we look at the case in New York, where the court has decided that Donald Trump now owes them more money than all of his properties are supposedly, according to them, worth. And not just him, but his family members being sentenced as well. Think about this. If they can sentence his family that they can no longer operate any business in the state of New York, and if this passes, why don't they just lock him up? Think about this. This is a civil case. And any civil case can generally, as far as I know, be punished by jail time less than 1 year. I could be wrong about that, but I do believe that civil cases can be punished with jail time of less than 1 year. So why don't they do that? The fact is, there's nothing at this point stopping them from doing that. Except for the fact that they didn't want to. They don't need to. The objective with Trump is not that they need to jail him. They just need to strip him of everything else, and then he will go away on his own. It's the same thing that I have said about cancel culture in the past. If you can take away somebody's income, if you can take away their shelter, if you take away their food, their water, if you take everything else away from them, then they will either leave or they will die. Because we are living beings. We require food, water, and shelter to live. And if you can deprive people of food, water, and shelter, then your problem will solve itself in a matter of time. This is what they're doing. This is what modern cancel culture does to normal people when they chase you out of your job, they chase you out of your home, your community, everything else, and they essentially exile you from society. With Donald Trump, if they can remove all of his money, if they can deprive him of all of his properties, if they can strip him of all of his businesses, the only thing that he will be able to do will be to flee to another country, never to return, or sooner or later, he will be found in default of something and he'll be thrown in a prison cell. Sometime eventually, when he is literally broke, literally destitute, he has no more lawyers to defend him, no more resources to levy against the court systems. At that point, they can just say, nobody cares about you anymore, nobody's going to defend you, nobody's going to save you, and then they will put him in a box. The only question I think then is, will they put him in a concrete box or a pine box? Because I personally think it will be the latter, but I could be wrong on that one. So that's the current case in New York. Then there's the case down in Georgia. And the case down in Georgia has been very interesting because what we saw there, that of course is the RICO case. That's the one where they declared that Trump he demanded that the people working with him on his campaign find some 11,000 votes, okay? And they, of course, treated this as fabricating 11,000 votes, which would be explicit election fraud. And even though there's no statement there that told them to do that, and it would take a certain reach of assumptions to determine that, they're proceeding with that anyway. To that end, they are charging Donald Trump with election fraud directly. And by using the RICO statute, they are charging every single other person who worked with him in Georgia, including the alternate slate of electors who literally did nothing but stand by in case they were able to find the however many votes they needed to carry Georgia, so that his alternate slate of electors could step up and carry the votes to DC. In other words, people who literally did nothing but agree to help Trump, to work for Trump, if the need arose. That is the current state of the trial in Georgia. However, it has not been going to plan. First off, because it is a RICO case, they wanted to try all of the defendants at once. You know, get it over nice and quick like. Just have them all lined up at one table, bang the gavel, say, you're all guilty, you're all going to prison. Well, that didn't work out because each one of them said, you know what? We'll go individually. You can do every single case individually, which then increased the caseload for this by about 11 times. The prosecutor and the DA were not happy about that. But then it came out that apparently there has been a gross amount of, what's the word I want to say? Corruption is actually a bit too mild of a word for this one, because it looks like there has been nepotism, there has been corruption, there has been fraud, there has been perjury, there has been literally almost everything that we have a law for inside the court in this case. And we have the direct testimony from both the district attorney and the prosecutor who have made their cases, and the cases have been so bad And this is going to be my air quotes objective evidence on this one. The evidence has been so bad that even the major news outlets like NBC, ABC, CNN, all of those are washing their hands of this case, saying this case is over. Okay? The district attorney and the prosecutor have essentially proven themselves incapable of doing this. They have broken several laws. They are going to be barred from trying this case, not just them, but their entire offices, and they may be disbarred from the profession entirely after this. The left-wing media is even going so far as to just completely give up on them. That's how bad the case is right now. And yet there are still people out there who are defending this. Okay, there are people who are crying racism because both the district attorney and the prosecutor are black. And so anybody who is on Trump's side is a racist. Because the district attorney is a woman, there are people who are claiming misogyny. Because these people will defend whatever happens to the full extent that they possibly can. If there was an actual hill for them to die on, they would be dead on it already. Now, why do I bring up this case? Because when we talk about a society growing great when old men plant trees whose shade they will never sit in, we have to keep in mind that great is subjective. Now, for everybody in this stream, you would not be here if you did not already agree with me. And all of us will agree that this is an absolute travesty of justice. Okay? As a matter of fact, travesty may not be a strong enough word, but I don't know that I have a strong enough word in my, or a stronger word in my vocabulary for it. So travesty will have to work. But there's a flip side to this coin. There is a flip side to this coin. Remember what I said about precedent and the fact that we have to completely disregard that word now, because all previous precedents no longer apply. That statement is only about 90% true. And I say it's only about 90% true because the word previous in there can be removed. Because while all previous precedents no longer apply, these cases are setting new precedents right now. The New York case, where they were allowed to summarily revalue all of Trump's properties, summarily issue a verdict on his actions without his defense, without his witness and testimony, and then summarily fine him and punish both him and his family, who were not even named. That is a precedent. Now, it is a precedent that is already under appeal. And the odds of this case actually hurting him in any way are pretty low. Because even if he loses on his New York appeal, given the constitutional nature of what's happening, it will likely go to the Supreme Court. Even if for the only reason of saying, look, while the valuation of his properties is not a constitutional issue, the way the case was handled is. But until that point, we now have even further precedent for the use of summary verdicts. We saw this in the property case in New York. We also saw this with the E. Jean trial, where the court said, we are not going into court to determine whether or not you committed a crime. The decision has already been made. You committed the crime. This court is only convened to ascertain the damages that you owe. Similarly, down in Georgia, we can see that, depending on how this turns out, and even to a lesser extent, regardless of how it turns out, that the legal system really no longer applies. Even if the district attorney and the prosecutor are removed, the amount of support that they still have from the people on the left, even if the media themselves have given up on this case, the amount of support that they have means that there's really nothing stopping them from doing this again. And they can continue to do it again and again and again until they get it right. They have absolutely no problem with going after anybody they see as their ideological enemies. If it's not Trump today and his associates, it can be somebody else tomorrow. And since we're talking about the state going after people, the state essentially has infinite resources. The state can literally do this all day, every day. These are the precedents that are being set. These are the seeds, the trees that are being planted. That even if we do not see the evidence, or even if we don't see the results tomorrow, next week, next month, or even next year, so long as we can get these precedents in, then we can see the fruit of this later on. Conversely, if we can strike these down and create our own precedents, we can do the same thing in the other direction. But we do stand at a precipice here. Right now, everything is in flux. Everything is up in the air. There are plates wobbling on every single stick. There is still room to turn it around. The only question is, can we? And we may be able to. Something very interesting actually is happening. So when we look at things like the birth rate, and we look at the social situation between men and women, with people like the Honey Badgers and Melanie King, and we look at things like TikToks, where women are by and large lamenting the fact that they can't seem to find relationships, they can't find men, they can't find partners, they can't have children, all of these things. Many people are realizing that the damage to the country has been done. And the people that are suffering are us. Okay? It's you. You're suffering. I'm suffering. All of these women out here who can't find partners, they're suffering. All the men out here who can't find partners, they're suffering. All the broken homes right now, because, both parents are working, all the children who are growing up without parents or with only a single parent because of things like no-fault divorce, they're suffering. And one universal truth is that many people, just part of the human condition, people will tend to ignore things that do not affect them directly. If it doesn't affect them, they don't care. It's not necessarily their fault, it's just part of how we are. Is it true that snakes are dangerous? Yes. How often do you think about dangerous snakes? You don't. Not unless you're in an area that might have dangerous snakes. Because what's the point? It's not until it affects you in some way that it suddenly becomes a huge priority for you. Well, guess what? Now the snakes are here, okay? The problems are here. They are affecting everybody. All of these sanctuary cities that said, yes, we love migrants, okay? We think that the U.S. is a country that everybody should come to. Well, guess what? All those people are now regretting their actions because guess what? The migrants are now there. You wanted to be a sanctuary city? Now you're dealing with the consequences of your actions. All these people who put off relationships and saying, you know what, I don't need anybody in my life, particularly when it comes to women. I don't need a man in my life. Remember, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. I have a career, and I'm going to be a strong and wealthy and independent woman. Well, until they don't want to be anymore, and then the options are gone. And people are learning. And people are seeing what's happening in the justice system right now, and they're realizing that, holy crap, they just decided they were going to take literally everything Donald Trump owned, because they just said that he devalued his property. They said that he defrauded the bank by overvaluing his property. And now they're going to take everything from him. And we know that the bank said he did everything fine, so we know this is ideological. What if I'm next? What if there's somebody in this area who hates me? What if they took me to court? Or just, left a note for the local district attorney? I've made the example before, and I will make it again here as we get ready to wrap this up. Imagine that you're a conservative, okay? Let's say you're a Trump supporter, because Trump supporters seem to attract all the attention. And you put a Donald Trump 2024 sign in your front yard, okay? Front yard of your house. So you've got, your regular house. You've got a walkway that goes up to the sidewalk. You've got a mailbox. Okay? You've got numbers on your house. Maybe you live in the corner. Maybe there's a street sign right there. And somebody who absolutely despises all Trump supporters is on their way to work. And they happen to work at the electric company. And so they see your house, and they see the Trump sign in your front yard. And so they pull off to the side for a minute, they pull out a scrap of paper, and they write down your address, okay? So it's 367 Mercantile Lane. All right? And then they go to work. They go to work at the power company. And once they get in there, they log into the computer, they punch up your number, they punch up the power grid, and they just say, disconnect. And so you're there minding your own business, okay? Maybe you're watching TV, maybe you're browsing the internet, maybe you're listening to somebody waste your time doing a live stream podcast kind of thing on YouTube. I don't know. People do that. It's weird. But maybe you're just minding your own business and all of a sudden, power's gone. And you're like, well, what the hell? Is the power out? And so you wait for it. And you wait, and maybe it's, 15 minutes, maybe it's half an hour, maybe it's an hour. But eventually you pull your cell phone out, still got battery on it, and you call up the power company and say, hey, power's out. Is there a problem somewhere? And they say, no, we don't have any problems. There's no outages. And you say, well, my power's out. And so they look at your address in the computer and they say, oh, hold on a second. It seems like your house has been disconnected. You say, how can my house have been disconnected? I just paid the bill 3 days ago. And they say, well, let me check your account. Yes, your account looks to be in order. Hold on, we'll fix this. And so they just go. And there we go. And your power is back on. And the lights come on, the TV comes on, the computer comes on, it's all good. And you just say, well, I don't know what happened, but thank you very much. What happens tomorrow? The same thing. Sometime like 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, power goes out. And you say, what the hell? What's going on? I thought we dealt with this. So you called the power company, and the power company person says, I don't know what's going on. But your house has been disconnected again. And so you keep getting targeted over and over and over again. And you don't know why. You don't know who's doing it. But the people who have the levers of power can target you, can harass you, can make your life hell until eventually you just go away. And if they can make Trump go away, they can make anybody go away. Because in this case, it's just the power in your house. But maybe somebody goes to the DA, pulls up your property records. Maybe you've got a mortgage on your house. Mortgages are public knowledge. Maybe they say, oh, look at this. You've got a mortgage on your house. You've got a loan or something. Well, I think your house has been grossly overvalued. Maybe we should have the DA or a judge take a look at that. After all, if it worked for Trump, you can do it to anybody else, right? Maybe you got an $80,000 mortgage on your house. Maybe they say, you weren't eligible for that. Pay back the entire $80,000 mortgage, plus the interest, plus the fines on top of that, or we're just going to seize your house. Seize your property. These are the precedents that are being set if we do not change it. And I do mean change it now. Because the long-term consequences of this, once we're there won't be any getting out of it. I don't think that we are past that point yet. But if it gets too much further, we will be. So, all I can say is pay attention. I don't necessarily know that or I believe that voting matters that much anymore, but I do think that you should pay attention to who you're voting for. I know that, at least in my case, I have lost all faith in my local representative, so I will absolutely not be voting for him. My local rep is Dan Muser, and that guy's a traitorous snake. So, definitely not voting for him. Don't know who I'm going to vote for, but it's not going to be him. So, my advice to you is to be more knowledgeable about what's going on. Use all that critical thinking. Look at what's going on now. Look at what's happened before. And wargame that out as far as you possibly can. It's not a crystal ball. It's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to just happen. You'll have to actually think about what are the possible moves and counter moves that come with everything you're seeing. Where does it end up? And if you don't like where it ends up, number one, how do you stop it? And how do you direct it to a better future for yourself? So that's your homework until next time. For now, though, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take a break. We're going to get out of here. I got to go shovel snow, too, now. Yay me. It's not bad, though. Next week, I don't know what the lecture is going to be. Hopefully I can put together something useful, valuable. I don't know. Maybe it'll be another week like this where we just cover topics from the week. We'll have to wait and see. But if you want to see more of it, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the bell icon. That way you get notified when they come out. Don't forget to share this video with anyone that you think might actually listen to it, as we established earlier in this lecture. Sharing this with people on the left, probably not going to do a damn thing. And ironically enough, if you share it with people on the right, they already agree, so they don't need to hear it. That dividing line is pretty well set in stone at this point. You're going to convince very few other people. But you know what? Even if it's people who already agree, I can always use the additional attention of the channel, so share it anyway. Tomorrow will be the normal tabletop live stream. We should be finishing the Tau, finally. We only have a little bit of the war gear left to do. It's just a lot of add-ons. We have to do drones and things like that. After we get done with that, if we have time, we may look into starting the Eldar. So if you're interested in tabletop games or Warhammer 40k, make sure you show up on Sunday for that one. Otherwise, though, I will see you next week. And until then, take care.